Joining us now to break this down and to give us their reaction to this is retired Major General Denis Thompson, former force commander of the Multinational Force and Observers in the Sinai. Thanks for joining us here live on CB24. I'm sure you were watching either us or what other feed of the PM of the Qatari government, as well as President Biden, kind of giving their reaction, answering some questions people have been giving. So what's your take on this? Because there have been there have been some mini ceasefires between Hamas and Israel to allow the hostages and prisoners to be exchanged, and then fighting starts again. Why is this one you think is going to be different?
Well, first of all, the last ceasefire was actually in November of 2023, so it's been some time, more than a year since we've had a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. So this is the first glimmer of hope, if you will, that we've had for a considerable period of time. And as Mr. Biden pointed out, the deal on the table is not that different from the one that was negotiated back in May. I think what has changed since then is, as was also pointed out, Hezbollah was seriously degraded. Iran has had a go at Israel 2 times and has been, their rockets have been defended against, and their surface-to-air missile batteries have been degraded as well. So Hamas is really backed into a corner. I think my take on this is, if it sticks on Sunday, this is good news for the population, the civilian population of the Gaza Strip, because finally some humanitarian assistance at scale can flow into the Gaza Strip, which is exceedingly important, given that they've been starved now for a considerable period of time.
And we understand that it still needs approval from Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet and his full cabinet. Do you think there's going to be any friction there, or do you think it should be somewhat of a slam dunk?
Right. There's no shortage of right-wing hardliner right-wingers in Mr. Netanyahu's cabinet. But what's, I think, more important is, my understanding is that this agreement has to be voted on not just by the cabinet, but by the entire Knesset. And if it moves to the government of Israel rather than the cabinet of Israel, it has a better chance of being passed. And that gives me optimism. Plus, I think the feeling among the Israeli population, generally speaking, is that this war has gone on far too long and they want their hostages back.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. And I'm sure, of course, the people living in Gaza, over 46,000 dead in this now nearly 16-month-long war. You know, you talked about how Iran is weakened. Hezbollah has been degraded, brought down. Head of Hamas is dead. President Biden mentioned that as well. But for Hamas, at least the military arm might be shut down in Gaza potentially, but it's still an idea. How do you make sure that Gaza right now, where a large part of it is reduced to rubble, how do you make sure that certain other fractions don't come out of the ashes to build more terrorist organizations? How do you continue that? How do you stop that from happening?
You made an excellent point. You can kill people, but you can't kill an idea. Mm-hmm. The way to kill an idea is to oppose it with another idea. And essentially what has gone on here is that Israel has conducted a counterterrorism campaign rather than a counterinsurgency campaign. And the subtle difference is, in a counterterrorism campaign, it is all about kinetic strikes, and the results of which we can see in the Gaza Strip today. In a counterinsurgency, you're actually trying to get your idea over the top. And this would have been solved, I think, and this could have happened, because Hamas was never very popular amongst the local civilian population inside of the Gaza Strip, had Israel taken a counterinsurgency approach. In other words, flood the Gaza Strip with humanitarian assistance, while at the same time prosecuting the terrorists that you can get to in a manner that doesn't create a whole bunch of collateral damage. And by so doing, you can drive a wedge between the population and the terrorist organization. That's not the approach that was taken, unfortunately. And so it's quite likely that the conduct of the Israeli Defense Forces will generate even more radical ideas inside the Gaza Strip, and we'll go back to the status quo ante bellum. In other words, the state of affairs that existed before October of 2023.
Interesting. And how does one rebuild Gaza? How do you do that? How many countries is that going to take?
I don't know how many countries it'll take, but there's no shortage of money inside of a host of Arab states. There are access points into the Gaza Strip, whether that is in the north through the Rafah crossing. That's in the south through the Rafah crossing, and also at the crossings controlled by Israel, in particular the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is run by a contractor. It's fairly secure. It was used prior to the war as the principal ingress route for all sorts of commercial traffic into the Gaza Strip. If that were opened up, if that spigot was reopened up at its maximum capacity, then sufficient supplies would flow into the Gaza Strip to permit reconstruction. But this is a project of years, not months, years, maybe even a decade, who knows?
And President Biden said, he mentioned, this is the exact same deal he brought up in May. He said it was brokered by his administration. It's going to be implemented by the next one. Donald Trump, inauguration on Monday, phase one reportedly starting on the Sunday. I mean, what do you think has Trump said anything? I think he said one thing on Truth Social. I haven't seen the message as of yet, but how do you think he's going to approach this? How much credit do you think he's going to take about this deal?
I think it would be the height of folly for me to try and predict what Mr. Trump is going to do.
That's true.
I will say I find it very interesting. History often repeats itself, but there's another expression that says it rhymes. In 1981, when Mr. Reagan came in and replaced Mr. Carter, on the day of his inauguration is when they released the American hostages that were held by Iran in the embassy hostage taking. It's a bit interesting that on the day after the ceasefire comes into effect, Mr. Trump will be sworn in as the next president of the United States of America.
Interesting. All right. It's definitely, last couple of weeks, definitely a lot of stuff to be talking about. We're glad you're with us here, retired Major General Denis Thompson, former force commander of the Multinational Force and Observers in the Sinai. Thanks so much. I do appreciate your reaction to this, your insight, your experience on this developing news. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Take care.